Police officers of Reddit, who's the smartest criminal you've ever encountered? I worked with this one guy who had a lengthy record. He had a system for getting released if he got caught. After committing a crime, if the police were in pursuit and he knew he was about to be cornered, he would act insane. His girl would play along with it, telling the police that he was off his medication. The police would arrest him but then send him to a mental ward with papers instructing the ward to release to police once he was cleared. Once he was in the mental ward, he would cause a distraction that would make the person attending the desk with the file cabinet to leave said cabinet. He would then crawl to the file cabinet, look for his release to police papers, and then would literally eat the papers. When the psych evaluators decided that he was stable enough to be released, there would be no instructions to send him to the police, and he would be released to the general public. He did this about 10 times until police officers noticed him back on the streets. This stunt forced the state to change their procedure for detaining mentally unstable suspects. My favorite was the guy who stole a post office mailbox off the street, repainted it, and then put it next to the night deposit box at a bank, and hung an out of order sign on the deposit box. All the businesses came along and dropped off their deposits in the mailbox. There's one guy I recently dealt with who is on parole. I stopped him in my city after he was looking to buy drugs. Usually people come from all over to buy drugs and then leave. I issue him a warning and let him go as it's pretty common, and he sang like a bird regarding the people he was trying to buy from. Anyway, the next day, I got a call from his parole officer who says he was alerted the guy was pulled over and wanted to verify that it was his guy that I stopped. I'm a little confused at first, but he goes on to say that the day before, he was scheduled to meet with him but he had an excuse and bailed. His excuse was that he was in the hospital. Well, when he spoke with him the following day, he was able to provide documentation that he had entered the hospital day 1 and had left day 2. Well, I had stopped him at 1:15 in the morning, and after looking at the picture, it was 100% him. Turns out the guy had checked in and out of the hospital on day 1, then in and out again on day 2. He then rearranged half the paperwork to make it look like he was in the hospital overnight, which would make my car stop of him appear like I mixed him up with someone else, as well as give him a valid excuse to miss their meeting. Not sure what's gonna happen to that guy, but I thought it was pretty clever. Most of them are really stupid, so this guy isn't a criminal mastermind, but here goes. He wanted to rob a jeweler's on our city's main street. So he found out the flat beside the jeweler's was empty, and he hid there. For 2 weeks he triggered the alarm on purpose several times a night. Massive headache for the police and the business. We turned up to see nothing there, nothing on cameras, thought it was just a fluke, so the jewelers turned off the alarm system and said they'd wait until the morning to get a new one installed or that one rewired because something wasn't right. As soon as he heard that and the police leaving, he tore down the wall, had already been working on this apparently, and robbed the place, taking his sweet time. Escaped without anyone noticing anything for hours, until the jewelers came back in the morning. Then he tried to resell something he stole which had a serial number on it and got caught. So not that smart after all. Good effort though. This was in the late 90s, early 00s. A guy in my dorm came to school solely to deal drugs. He took out student loans, registered for a bunch of 300-person freshman survey courses where he would never be missed, then literally never went to class. All he did was go to raves and concerts and keggers and sell party drugs. After the first semester, he was suspended. He wrote the usual "I was young and dumb and in over my head" sob story, and got put on probation for a semester. So he had a repeat of the fall. At the end of the year, he was kicked out, and didn't care. He made something on the order of $150,000, in return for about $8,000 in student loans to cover a year of housing and tuition. So far as I know, he was never caught. It may have been a short-sighted maneuver in the long run, but in the short run it seemed fairly genius to effectively use federal loans to start your drug business. Working in a home improvement store when younger. This guy came in, went to the snowblowers, took one and went to the return desk. Said he wanted to return it but had no receipt. They told him, "You need a receipt," so he says, "Okay, I'll be back," and wheels it off to car through the front door. He did this a few times apparently. Couple places even helped him load it back into his car. A French thief who spent 10 years in prison became a comedian when he got out. One of his stories. Finds a building, goes in, chooses a floor and transforms the exit door into an extra apartment. Puts the apartment number, fake lock, welcome rug, etc. Puts an iPhone for sale. The person comes to buy it, he opens the door in a shower robe and says, "Give me 1 second, I'm just gonna count the money," and poof, he's gone from the exit stairs. Probably someone who committed a crime I never solved. With that being said, I had a guy use a sledgehammer to smash his way through a wall at a Best Buy and steal a bunch of phones and cameras. He was smart enough to wear gloves and a face mask and not touch anything he didn't have to. Alarms didn't go off until he exited out the back door, which the alarm company gets after a minute or two and takes them like 3/4 minutes to call into us, giving him a good 5-minute head start, so he was probably a few miles away before we got dispatched to it. He clearly scoped out the area before doing his deed too. Smart dude. Edit. So part of the building was built into a hill, so the hole was on the back side of the building along the grade line, but when you're inside the building it was about 8 feet up, so it was easier for him to leave out a door. Also, the wall section where he broke through was hollow cement block, the portion of the wall below that was poured concrete. There's a small tourist town where I grew up that is divided in half by a big river. The only way between the two sides is over a long bridge, unless you go all the way around another mountain pass. These guys called in, like, 2 to 3 bomb threats to a posh hotel on one side of the bridge. I think they even left some dummy packages. These guys called in, like, 2 to 3 bomb threats to a posh hotel on one side of the bridge. I think they even left some dummy packages. The guys then called in a bomb threat on the bridge and started robbing stuff on the other side. The police couldn't be positive the bomb threat was real or not and hesitated long enough to give the thieves a head start. I first heard this story about 10 years ago, in Banff, Alberta. Never bothered to look up what was real versus what is invented. I think this is pretty close. But as my father used to say, you can't let truth get in the way of a good story. I have a friend who is no longer a criminal but committed crimes for about 15 years and never got arrested or even investigated. Some of his highlights: growing weed in a shed on his neighbor's property. The neighbor was old and never left the house. Buying a building under a fake name, taking out huge loans against it, getting HUD money, and burning it all down. Sold fake raffle tickets to raffle off stuff he never had and never raffled. I can't remember how many times he pulled that scam, but he bought a new car with the money. He moved a bunch of times because people would suspect him of being a con man. His dad was in jail for similar stuff. But he was never even questioned by the police about anything. Now he has a family and a normal job. The story goes like this: a homeowner walks out one morning to drive to work only to find his car missing. He reports the car stolen to police. A few days later, his car is sitting back in front of his house. When he gets inside, he finds a note. It was an apology that said the thief was in dire need of quick transportation and so he borrowed the first car he found with the keys inside. The writer noticed the sticker on the car for the local sports team, and just so there were no hard feelings, he left 4 tickets to an upcoming game in the glove box for the homeowner and his family. So the homeowner and his family attend the game, but when they return home they find the house has been ransacked and all items of value are gone. Edit. Some of you have noted this is an urban legend, which is true. It is also true that some urban legends have a basis in fact. A guy, let's call him Dave, I worked with told this story. He was working at a Mercedes dealership. He was sitting at his desk when this well-dressed gentleman comes in and asks if he could test drive a specific car that was parked out front. It was also a busy day. Usually they are allowed to let people test drive by themselves after they have taken some form of a deposit or something, maybe the official IT or something, not really relevant. So Dave gives out the keys, the guy goes on his test drive and comes back a reasonable amount of time later. He walks in and hands off the key, gets his deposit/whatever back. This was about closing time, even possibly on a Friday. Everything is in order. Fast forward to the next business day. Dave's boss walks in and realizes that one of the Mercedes out front is gone. Dave has to explain that the car was returned and that they have the key and everything. Turns out the criminal didn't test drive, he drove somewhere to create a replica of the key and gave that replica back to the desk. He kept the real key. That smart son of a bitch. Edit. Dave is not the criminal. He is the employee. Apparently people think Dave is the criminal. D. Edit 2. It was probably part of this group. Edit 3. Okay, maybe the key wasn't copied but switched or something. I didn't put much thought into the details of the story since Dave told me this story a few years ago. I also don't know much about key security on modern cars. There was a guy with over 50 speeding charges, with the name Prawo Jazdi. He was in a different car, with a different disguise every single time. Eventually, after the government set up a special task force to take down this guy, they realized that Prawo Jazdi means driver's license in Polish. Clarification: it was 50 different people. The police just wrote down their name as Prawo Jazdi every time someone with a Polish driver's license was caught speeding. I'm not a cop, but I would say DB Cooper deserves a mention. Dude hijacked a plane, got ransom money and released all the passengers, had the plane take off again, then during the second flight parachuted out of the plane and was never caught.